Greetings, everyone. It's Father Brian from St. Moses the Black Sacramental Mission of the Liberal Catholic Union here in Asheville, North Carolina. And I wanted to make a short follow-up video on the video I made about original sin. So today what I want to talk about is a way in which to interpret original sin in an esoteric fashion. I spent many years as a Buddhist and deeply involved in Buddhist study and Buddhist practice. And what is called the first noble truth in Buddhism is that existence is suffering. Now, the word that Buddhists traditionally use that we translate in English as suffering is a word called dukkha. And perhaps a more accurate translation of dukkha than suffering is dissatisfactoriness, because the concept covers everything from abject physical or mental suffering all the way to the dissatisfactoriness of a meal that's not quite cooked right, or a conversation that goes wrong, or a rough day at work, or an argument with your partner. All of this falls under the umbrella of suffering from a Buddhist perspective. Now, as Buddhism has deeply informed my path, as a Gnostic Christian, one of the ways I look at original sin is as original suffering. And when I use the word suffering, I'm using it in this broad sense to cover everything from abject suffering to unsatisfactoriness. And the idea here is that original sin is the way to explain the fact that we always feel that things are not quite right. We always feel that there's some way in which we could alter what's occurring and make things better. I know I have felt this way most of my life. I think it's a normal, almost perhaps universal human experience. We're always tinkering with reality, trying to make things a bit more comfortable, a bit more in the direction that we want them to go. And then of course, when there is out and out suffering, everyone tries to move away from that. Even plants move away from a stimulus that causes suffering. It's universal, and in this sense, it's original. It's always there. It's always been there. The Buddhists talk about the causeless cause, and this is the sense that I'm bringing to the word original. It's original in that it has nothing to do with anything you did in the past, right? We want to get rid of this idea of guilt that has been conventionally associated with the concept of original sin. So here at St. Moses the Black, we interpret the concept of original sin in this Gnostic sense of it being an explanation for why there is suffering in the world. There are lots of ways to look at the concept of original sin, and from my perspective, one of the things that is part of this Christian path is to look at these terms from new angles and from new directions. Most of us have always heard of original sin as something that's kind of passed down, that, like I talked about last week, that you're born from your mother's womb, originally dirty and flawed. I've heard some Christians give the explanation that original sin describes the fact that we live in a fallen world. None of this do I resonate with. To me, we live in a world full of blessing, full of wonder, but it's also full of suffering. And this is just part of the package. It's original. It's there from the beginning. So that's a short video on my second take on original sin. Perhaps next week we'll talk a little bit about what is the Christian path for dealing with suffering. But until that time, I hope you guys have a great Friday. Please feel free to share this video, post any questions you have, and I look forward to talking to you again.